Spring 1946. World War II had just ended and people were finally kind of starting to feel safe again. And then over the course of 10 weeks, someone started wearing a white mask and they started hunting couples on dark roads around Texarkana. 5 people were dead, 3 survivors, and nearly 400 suspects. And to this day, well, nobody knows who did it. And this is the story that inspired the movie, The Town That Dreaded Sundown. But the real case is way more terrifying than any movie could be. So let's dive in. Welcome back to Texas History Mysteries, and today we're going to dive into one of the most terrifying unsolved cases in Texas history. Texarkana is a very unique place. It literally sits on the state line between Texas and Arkansas. Half the city's in Texas and half the city's in Arkansas, and in 1946 it was a peaceful town of about 30,000 people. February 2nd, 1946, around midnight, 25-year-old Jimmy Hollis and his 19-year-old girlfriend Mary Jean Larry had just seen a movie together. They drove to a secluded road known as Lover's Lane, a spot where young couples would go park and talk. Suddenly, a flashlight beam hit their windshield. A man approached the driver's side. He was wearing a white cloth sack over his head with holes cut out for his eyes. He did have a gun. The masked man ordered them out of the car. He told Jimmy to remove his pants. Then he pistol whipped him twice, fracturing his skull in 2 places. He turned to Mary Jean and he struck her with the gun. He sexually assaulted her with the barrel of the weapon. Then another car's headlights appeared in the distance. The attacker fled into the dark. Both victims survived. They went to the police. They gave descriptions of their attacker and the attack, but there wasn't much to go on. A man in a white mask, medium build, and that was really it for as far as suspects goes. The police investigated, but honestly, they treated it like an isolated incident, a random assault. Terrible, but isolated. They had no idea what was coming. March 24th, 1946, 4 weeks later, just after midnight, Richard Griffin, a 29-year-old who had recently returned from military service, was on a date with 17-year-old Polly Ann Moore. They parked on a quiet stretch of road on the Texas side of Texarkana, another Lover's Lane type of situation. The next morning, a passing motorist spotted Griffin's car. Both victims were inside. Both had been shot multiple times, and Richard had been shot 4 times in the back of the head. Polly Ann had been shot twice. Here's what made it even more horrific. Polly Ann's body showed signs that she'd been sexually assaulted. Both victims were partially undressed. The killer had moved them after the death, positioning them in disturbing ways inside the vehicle. This is when Texarkana started to panic. I mean, the Griffin Moore murders made headlines, but police still weren't publicly connecting the dots to the Hollis-Larry attacks from that February. 3 weeks went by and people were nervous, but starting to kind of relax. Maybe it was over. Maybe the killer had left town. Maybe. But April 14th, 1946, it was Easter Sunday morning, and a farmer found a car abandoned on a dirt road. Inside were a bloody saxophone case and a woman's purse. The car belonged to 17-year-old Paul Martin. Police searched the area. They found Paul's body a mile away in the woods. He was shot 4 times with a .32 caliber automatic pistol. His body showed signs of extreme brutality. Then they found 15-year-old Betty Jo Booker. She had been shot twice in the face at such close range that powder burns covered her skin. She had also been shot in the back. And this was when Texarkana absolutely lost it, because Betty Jo Booker wasn't just any teenager. She was a high school junior, a sorority member, an officer in her high school band. She'd been Little Miss Texarkana. She'd won scholastically, literary, and musical prizes. Hundreds of students attended her funeral. The Texarkana Daily News ran a headline that quotes, "Phantom Killer Eludes Officers." The name stuck. The entire city went into lockdown mode. Hardware stores sold out of guns, ammunition, and locks within days. People who'd never owned weapons started sleeping with loaded pistols on both sides of the bed. Parents made their children sleep on the floor next to them, and at sunset, People literally locked themselves inside their home and wouldn't come out until the morning. And this is in a town where that wasn't the commonplace, like at a time when the streets were, fine. The Texas Rangers arrived, including the famous Manuel Lone Wolf Gonzalez, a charismatic lawman who wore custom suits and pearl-handled pistols. Reporters flooded in from across the country. The FBI got involved. Nearly 400 suspects were investigated, and people were being arrested left and right on the flimsiest of suspicions. And, the Phantom, he was still out there. May 3rd, 1946, about 9 p.m., Virgil and Katie Starks were at their farmhouse 10 miles northeast of Texarkana on the Arkansas side. They were in their mid-30s at the time, definitely older than the previous victims, and they weren't at a lover's lane. They were at their home. Virgil was sitting in his living room chair reading the newspaper, and Katie had gone to bed. Katie heard glass break, 2 shots fired through the window. Virgil was hit in the back of the head, killed instantly. Katie ran to the phone to call for help. The killer shot her twice through the window. Once actually went through her jaw, and the bullet lodged under her tongue. Once through her face, breaking her nose. But Katie Starks, she did something that was pretty awesome. Despite being shot in the face twice, blinded by her own blood, she ran out of the house and down the road to a neighbor's home for help. She survived. She's the reason we know what happened the rest of that night and the details. But then nothing. The Phantom Killer never struck again. 10 weeks of terror, 8 people attacked, 5 dead, and then silence. Well, why did he stop? Arkansas State Police Trooper Max Tackett noticed something strange. Around the time of each murder, a car would be reported stolen nearby. Then that stolen car would turn up abandoned after the attack. This led him to a 29-year-old career criminal named Ul Swiney. Swiney had a long rap sheet: car theft, counterfeiting, burglary, assault. He was the son of a Baptist minister from rural Arkansas, but he'd chosen a very different path. June 1946, police set up a stakeout on a stolen car. A woman showed up to claim it, Peggy Lou Stevens. She said she just married Ul Swiney that day, but didn't know where he was. She was arrested, and 2 weeks later, Swiney tried to sell a stolen Plymouth to a car dealer in Atlanta, Texas. The dealer tipped off police within a day. Trooper Tackett spotted the car in Texarkana. Swiney was arrested after a short foot chase. And here's where it gets kind of crazy. On the way to the jail, Swiney asked Deputy Tillman Johnson, "Mr. Johnson, what do you think they'll do to me for this? Will they give me the chair?" That's a weird question for a car thief. Car theft doesn't carry the death penalty anywhere except maybe overseas somewhere, but murder does. Multiple times during questioning, Swiney said things like, "You got me for more than stealing cars?" Police found circumstantial evidence. Peggy was driving a car stolen the night of the Griffin Moore murders. They found a work shirt in Swiney's room with a laundry mark reading STARK matching Virgil Starks. In the shirt's pocket was welding slag that matched samples from Virgil Stark's welding shop. Then Peggy Swiney confessed in detail. She told investigators that Ul was the Phantom Killer. She described the murders, including details that hadn't been released to the public. Sheriff Bill Presley tested her. He asked if Swiney had taken anything from Paul Martin's pockets. She said, "I saw him take some papers or stuff," and that he'd thrown them into the bushes. Presley then revealed he found Paul Martin's date book in the bushes at the crime scene, a detail only known to him. But there was a pretty big problem. Peggy's story kept changing across multiple interviews. Some details were inconsistent. Police believed that she was either afraid of Swiney or trying to protect herself from being charged in the murders. And then she recanted everything. Under 1940s law, a wife couldn't be forced to testify against her husband. Without Peggy's testimony, prosecutors had only circumstantial evidence. It was not enough. Ul Swiney was never charged with murder, none of them. Instead, in 1947, he was convicted of car theft. Because of his long criminal history, he was sentenced to life in prison as a habitual offender. In 1973, his conviction was overturned on appeal. The court found that a prior conviction used for sentencing was void because Swiney hadn't been actually represented by any legal counsel at the time. And he was released. Yoel Sweeney died in 1994 at a nursing home in Dallas. He never confessed. He never admitted to anything. In 1992, a researcher named Mark Bledsoe interviewed Sweeney, and according to Bledsoe, Huntsville prison cellmates had said Sweeney told them details about the killings that had never been reported in the newspapers. But, we'll never know for sure. Texas Ranger Max Tackett, Deputy Tillman Johnson, and Sheriff Bill Presley, the three lead investigators, all believed until their deaths that Yoel Sweeney was the Phantom Killer. James Presley, the nephew of Sheriff Bill Presley, spent years researching the case. In 2014, he published The Phantom Killer, Unlocking the Mystery of the Texarkana Serial Murders. His conclusion is that Sweeney did it, but there were a few other suspects. A high school student named H.B. Dewey Tennyson confessed to the murders in a suicide note before swallowing rat poison in 1948, but his fingerprints didn't match evidence at the crime scene, and his brothers said he didn't know how to use weapons. It was probably just like a mental illness. In 1999 and 2000, an anonymous woman contacted family members of the victims to apologize for what her father had done. But Yoel Sweeney never had a daughter, so it wasn't connected to him. And in 1976, filmmaker Charles B. Pierce made The Town That Dreaded Sundown, a semi-fictionalized horror movie about the murders. And it was filmed in Texarkana and featured Ben Johnson and Don Wells. The brother of victim Polly Ann Moore sued Pierce for $1.3 million, claiming his sister was depicted as a high school dropout and a woman with loose and low morals when she had actually graduated at 16. The court denied his claims. The film became a cult classic and helped pioneer the slasher genre. It came out 2 years before the movie Halloween. A meta sequel was made in 2014. Every October, Texarkana holds a free screening of the original film at Spring Lake Park. The cases remain unsolved. The Texas Department of Public Safety once called it the #1 unsolved murder case in Texas history. The FBI maintains over 1,100 pages of documents on the investigation, and they are available online in the FBI vault, but be cautious, just from someone who's looked at them. So was it Yoel Sweeney? I think the evidence points that way, in my opinion. The car thefts matching the murder timeline, the suspicious statements, Peggy's detailed confessions, even though she recanted them, I think were kind of a clue. The physical evidence linking him to the Starks farmhouse, but we'll never know for certain at this point, and that's what makes this case so kind of crazy and creepy. 5 people were murdered in their own community. 3 were brutally attacked. An entire city lived in fear for months, and the person responsible was never officially held accountable. Betty Jo Booker was only 15 years old, and Paul Martin was 17. Polly Ann Moore was 17. Richard Griffin was 29, just home from serving his country. Virgil Starks was 37, sitting in his own living room. They deserve to be remembered for more than just how they died. And so if you do want to learn more about this case, check out James Presley's book, The Phantom Killer. You can get a copy online. Or search the FBI vault for the case files. There's also the Michael Newton book, The Texarkana Moonlight Murders. So if you enjoyed this deep dive into the Texarkana murders, please like and subscribe. It really does help other people find this video. We cover unsolved crimes, lost treasures, paranormal mysteries, and all the stories they forgot to tell you about. So drop a comment and tell me what you think. Do you think Yoel Sweeney was the Phantom Killer, or is the real killer still unknown? Did I miss something? Is there a suspect I missed? But overall, thanks for watching, and see you on the next one.